Thank you for joining us on this week's episode of the Paladin Group podcast, Evolving Minds. My name's Clare Harrison and I'm the COO of the Paladin Group. Thanks as always to our sponsors, Abilities Enabled, who help us pull this podcast together to share information, guidance and advice to individuals and families following a brain injury. Today, I'm joined by Liam Harvey of Paladin Advice. Hi Liam.
Hi Claire.
Thanks for joining me today. Do you want to start by telling us a little bit about you and a little bit about Paladin?
So my name's Liam Harvey. I'm a chartered financial planner and expert witness. So what does that involve? As an expert witness, I'm instructed by personal injury and clinical negligence solicitors to quantify financial loss. So that involves preparing reports to the court on matters such as loss of earnings, loss of pension, providing advice on the structure of the award when there's a periodical payment, which is one of the topics at the upcoming Brain Injury Conference. I do that in Scotland as well as England and Wales. And as a chartered financial planner, that involves providing financial advice to clients that are going through claims. And also when the claim's settled. So at Paladin Group, we're an independent financial advice firm. And as a company, we completely focus on providing advice to solicitors, professionals, as well as clients that have suffered a personal injury or a clinical negligence claim.
Thanks. So I think that's a key point to pick up on, two things that you mentioned there, that Paladin are an independent financial planning firm, and also that you specialise in providing advice once somebody has had some sort of catastrophic event in their lives. And I think you and the other guys there have got lots of experience over the years in that specialism. Can you tell me a little bit about why it's a particular type of specialism and why it's important to for whoever's giving you the advice on your financial planning, whether that be in the lead up to the settlement of a claim or after a claim, to have that specialist knowledge of what somebody's life is going to be like post-injury?
So it's a good question. I think specialising in the field is key, and when instructing a financial advisor, it's a very important consideration, because the advice you're providing, if you were to think of what providing financial advice is, it might be providing advice on pensions, what to do with somebody's cash savings, trying to minimise and manage tax planning. But when you're advising a client that suffered a life-changing event, the advice you're providing is completely different. You need to appreciate sort of the journey that they've went through and the fact that they really shouldn't be receiving this sum of money in the first place. A lot of the advice you're providing, sometimes a lot of the time, it's not even really around financial planning. It can literally be anything. So it's just understanding what they've went through and knowing the questions that they're going to ask, and just for the instructing person to know that they're going to be in a safe pair of hands.
Great. And you mentioned the expert work as well, so you can be involved in that person's life for a long period of time. Ideally, when is the right time to get a financial expert or financial planner involved in the process?
So we always say as early as possible, even if it's just having a conversation initially about the claim and what sorts of heads of loss need to be identified and then quantified. And we always say if it's just picking up a phone and having a quick conversation about a case, and it can sort of save time later down the line. When liability has been identified and causation determined, you can then start looking at what losses need to be identified. And that's when you start looking at what the loss of earnings is. So is that person, have they stopped working completely? Have they changed job role? It might even be that they're earning very similar money, but they've moved from the public sector to the private sector. Have they lost employment benefits, for example? So there's so much to consider. And then alongside that, you've got the pension loss as well. So I think identifying those early on, it will save time later down the line rather than sort of rushing about trying to get the report ready before the trial date.
And what about, you also talked about the structure of an award and your involvement in looking at that. What value can you bring to those discussions as a financial expert?
We can take that conversation away from the instructing solicitor and just look at what is best for that individual in terms of the structure of the award. So that means the comparison that you're providing within the report and the analysis focuses on whether or not the settlement should be a lump sum, which means that that person will receive a one payment of potentially a significant amount of money into their bank account, whether it's via a professional deputy, whether it's into a trust, but they will receive one payment, and that payment is to last them for the rest of their life, however long that may be, in comparison to a combination of a lump sum with a periodical payment. So a periodical payment is a guaranteed payment for life for a specific head of loss. Generally, it's to meet the cost of care, to meet the cost of case management, even deputyship fees. I've seen it done where it's to meet care home fees for an elderly person. It can be for anything, but generally those are the most common heads of loss where a PPO is considered appropriate. So it's about looking at the structure, finding out how that person feels about how they would like to receive their sum of money, because for example they might just want to receive a sum of money and then case closed, they don't need to worry about anything again. But it's about helping them understand the benefits of both options. The fact with the PPO that even if they go and spend that full payment in a relatively short space of time, in the December the year after, because it's every December you receive the periodical payment, they know they're going to get that again. Regardless of how long they live, that payment will continue indefinitely, whereas with a lump sum, the way that it's calculated is that it's based on their estimated life expectancy. So if there is discussion on when that life expectancy may be, the lump sum may be actually less because they might come to an agreement that life expectancy is reduced, but we know fine well life expectancy is nobody knows. So the fact that periodic payment can continue indefinitely is such an important consideration. But I say with these reports and advice you're providing, it is so bespoke and no report is the same. It's about getting the opinion of the client themselves, the support team around them, and then running the numbers and really see what option looks best.
So I suppose for you then, even though you've been instructed by the professional, the litigation solicitor at the pre-settlement stage, it's important for you equally to get that introduction to the family so you can understand what the family's lives are like, how they're going to live moving forward, what's involved, and then you can help them balance the risk of what a lump sum versus a periodical payment looks like, because it's much about risk, I assume then, in terms of do we want the risk of having that lump sum and managing it ourselves and accepting that it may end if we've got the life expectancy question wrong or we don't spend things or invest things in the right way, versus having that little bit of extra security with part of the settlement as a periodical payment.
Of course, I think that's important because it's not just running numbers and saying financially this person will be better off if they just have a lump sum or they just have a periodical payment. I think that's an important part of the report, but it's about having a conversation with that person, with the support team around them and asking, how would you feel about this? Because again, opinions vary greatly, and it's very important that their thoughts and how they feel about it is taken into account with it. And that's just as important as the finances behind it, because even recently I had a case where it was very clear that a periodical payment was the financially better option, but the person was really having sleepless nights, that they thought that they really felt that they had to survive another year to keep receiving the payments, and it was really having a negative impact on their mental health. So just that alone, you just completely disregard what's financially better and you go what's best for that person.
Yeah, and I think that's a really key point that you've just made there, because that's been a consistent theme throughout a lot of these podcasts that we've done when we've spoken to family members or those supporting loved ones. Communication and listening to what they want, need, what fits right with their family life, and understanding as professionals that they're letting us into really personal parts of their life at really difficult times. So I think the financial planning side, the financial expert side fits as well into that mix, that you do have to take the family's lives into consideration and understand that you are being allowed in to be part of their life and their future.
Yeah, definitely. And I think going back to your question about the importance of specialising in this type of work, the fact when you're doing the expert witness work, you're seeing all the graft and work that's going into this claim, and really it can go on for years and years, and really the pain that people go through to get this settlement. So the fact that you get to look in and you understand what they've been through, when it finally gets to the settlement, you're having the conversation, and if you've already been involved during the litigation, this person completely understands that you know what they've went through. So a lot of the work's already been done, and even when you've not been involved, the fact when you explain that that's part of your day-to-day role, the fact that you're representing these people in the court, they understand, and it sort of helps break down that barrier, I think, and it's always rewarding. I think one of the best things in a meeting, you say you might meet with someone, or most likely with a family, and obviously at the start they're sort of, as you would be, because they've sort of, their lives have completely changed, they can be maybe quite reserved. They think sort of, who's this person, why are they asking me all these questions? But it's always nice to see, sometimes after a number of meetings, the guard starts to come down and you start to see who that person is, and just slowly they start letting you into their lives. And that's what I always tell people when we meet. Something that can seem so daunting, receiving a very large sum of money, I always tell people that you might not think this now, but eventually, whether it's in months or in years, this will just become normal to you, and you will begin to understand what investing is and what tax planning is, and how to make sure that this money lasts for your lifetime. So yeah, it's always nice to see that, and just it's all about just educating them, and yeah, over time the guard comes down, and then they're letting you into their lives, I think, which is so important.
Yeah, it's about building that trust, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think for you in the role that you do, that trust is with the professionals that you work with, the deputies or the litigation solicitors, but also those family members and the individual themselves, if they're able to have some involvement and input into what's happening moving forward. I think the other thing perhaps in terms of you guys as specialist financial planners and expert witnesses, maybe you have a broader understanding of the things surrounding financially, what impact those things have on families, like welfare benefits, and whether somebody can return to work, whether that's the individual or their family member themselves, what the future looks like, where it's we're talking about adults today because we're on the adult brain injury podcast, but where maybe it's a younger person that's had that injury and maybe their career path hasn't been set out for them yet, looking at sort of the impacts of that moving forward into the future. I think welfare benefits is a particular sort of expertise that you guys probably have that you wouldn't necessarily have as much of as a regular financial planner maybe.
Yeah, because I think, say, just with regular financial planning, you're looking at what money is available to invest and how is best to invest it. But I think when you're supporting someone that's received a settlement, really the actual investing part of it is quite far down the line, because with most of these people, they've never potentially had money to invest before, and there's so many more hurdles to get over first before you even get to the point of investing or tax planning. It's about looking at how is best for the money to be held, whether or not a personal injury trust is set up. Why would you look at setting up a personal injury trust to protect those benefits that you mentioned? Looking at what income that person is now receiving, if they're on reduced hours, if they're not able to work anymore. Having a chat with them to see, are they receiving all eligible benefits, even things like local authority funding, adaptations to the house if they're going to buy a property. These are the conversations that you're having to make sure, even before you're having a conversation about do we go higher risk or lower risk? You're making sure that they're receiving all the streams of income they should be eligible for, they're receiving the grants that they should be getting. And it all goes down to the point that it's so much more to just simply providing financial advice on a sum of money that's been received. You're looking at their whole life, you're looking at what benefits the family might be eligible for, you're looking at how they're even getting on in terms of where they sort of fit into that support network. So yeah, there's a lot to it.
Yeah, I can imagine. And turning now to the financial planning side of things, does that start at settlement? Because often we have payments during the claim, people receive interim payments for various different things. So would you say your role as a chartered financial planner starts at settlement, or is it before that?
It really depends on when the instruction or referral is received. It's always beneficial to be involved, like we said before, with expert witness work, being involved as early as possible. Even if that's a relatively small interim payment, you're having a conversation whether or not a trust is suitable for them, or if it's a deputyship, they're in receipt of that money. If that money's been spent on a specific purpose, then it might come into the account and go straight back out. But even just providing some initial cash advice on that, making sure that the money's just at least earning some interest. Again, it all goes down to are they receiving the eligible benefits they're entitled for. You're having that conversation at that point, and sometimes a referral might just be having a conversation with somebody that's going through a claim to just answer the questions that they've got, and that's something that we'll always provide. And yeah, give up our time to have that conversation, because some people might just have a number of questions that they want answered. And yeah, just if we're involved early on, it means, because you find when settlement does come round, nobody really knows how they're going to feel and have this conversation every week. Some people might have a notepad of questions that they want answered, and you're sort of going through every question and answering it and going on to the next question. But some people just don't even know how to feel or what to ask. And I think it goes down to there's no right or wrong way to feel in this situation. You're never going to know how you feel until the moment comes. So it's just about taking your time and having that support team around you, and just, yeah, as we said before, eventually this will just become normal and you can just get back to living a normal life and just enjoying life.
Yeah, great. I think we've touched a little bit, we've mentioned deputyships and we've mentioned personal injury trusts. I know a lot of our audience will know sort of where each of those fit into the process, but there may be some of our audience who aren't quite as aware of when a personal injury trust might be appropriate versus when a deputyship might be appropriate. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
So a personal injury trust will be set up for an individual that's deemed to have capacity. So that person is able to manage their own financial affairs. And the reason why you would consider setting up a personal injury trust is that any money that's been received from the claim, whether it's interim payments throughout the claim or the final settlement, when it's placed into a personal injury trust, it's disregarded by the DWP. So that means that individual is able to continue receiving the benefits that they're eligible for, which I think is so important, especially in potentially settlement. The value that's been achieved is not what was expected, so there's a shortfall potentially. The fact that that person's able to continue receiving those benefits is so important, and it takes pressure off that settlement. And a deputyship is put in place when that person that's received the sum of money that's suffered the injury, whether it's a brain injury or whatever it might be, isn't able to manage their own financial affairs. They need that support. So through the court of protection, a deputy is appointed, whether that's a professional deputy, so a solicitor, or a lay deputy, which potentially is a family member or friend. But I would say generally it's a professional that's involved.
Yeah, and I think that's an important distinction. It's different for all families, isn't it? But sometimes it's good to have a third party involved as a professional, and you can continue to be the spouse, parent, loved one of that individual that's had the injury, and have, rather than having a function or a role that's not a caring or a loving or a normal relationship role with your...
Yeah, because I'd say just certainly looking from where we stand in it all, a spouse, for example, providing that deputyship function, I can imagine there's so much that needs to be done in terms of reporting and their duties to the court of protection. And I've seen many times where as a husband or wife may take on that position and eventually it does transfer over to a professional because they just want to go back to just supporting that person in a way that they've been normal to. So it's, there's certainly a lot to it.
Yeah, and I think as we progress and we get to the point of settlement, I think your role at that point of time can be quite challenging. It's a period of time where I think families I've seen experience a moment of relief because they've been through a long, protracted litigation process. They've finally got to the point where they feel like it's done because they've had a settlement. And then perhaps somebody like you comes in and starts the next phase of that process. So it's certainly a shift and a change that families have to navigate. Do you experience that when you are involved at point of settlement?
Yeah, again, I think like all these meetings, everyone is completely different, but I'd say the two main scenarios that you come up against is that this claim might have been going on for 5 years, 10 years, and they've had this professional team around them that's really anything to do with this claim they're doing for them. They're just, I suppose, making sure that they're happy with the process and things, and then settlement comes. They say thanks to the solicitor, then that professional relationship ends, and they think, all right, and it's now down to us to manage. This is more for when it's an individual dealing with it themselves, as opposed to having a professional deputy think, well, sort of what do we do? What do we do now? Who do we speak to? We need to make sure we're doing the right thing. So I think that's when it comes down to, like we said before, even being involved at that earlier stage. It means it's not this quite scary ordeal. They already know I've got the support team around me. We can just sort of get on with our life. Some planning's already been done to structure the money in a way that's going to meet our needs.
We've come to the point of settlement and you guys get involved and you're probably getting involved at quite a difficult time again in the process. The families have spent a long time going through the litigation process and then they maybe have this feeling of relief or gratefulness that they've done with that professional side. But then the realisation probably comes that there's a whole new set of things to start thinking about and how do they, make sure this money does what it's there to do. It's not a windfall, it's not a lottery win. So you're coming in at that point and trying to support them with that. How do you navigate that? Is that something that you see quite a lot?
Yeah, I think everybody feels different, like I said before, at this stage. Some people know exactly what to do with the money. They know they've already found the property that they're going to buy. They've already put down a deposit on the car they want. But then some people, and I think because there can be cases where the individual, the family, might not even expect to settle the claim. They might just go into a meeting just as a sort of a joint settlement meeting to try and work out what it might settle for, and they might get an unexpected offer. So yeah, it's always very different, and at that point they just won't know how they feel. They're just the sum's being agreed and they think, right, what do we do now? And they've been used to having this solid professional team around them, the solicitor, the barrister advising them on, right, this is potentially what's best for you, these are the options. The settlement order signed, the case is settled, and they think, right, well, what do we do now? We've got more questions to ask. We want to get on with our life, and that's where a specialist financial planner would come in to try to take the reins on really from the solicitor. And I think alongside, what I always think is the most important thing, is just having that support team around the family, whether it's case managers, care providers, solicitors as well, from the point of view, if a will now need to be drafted, as a power of attorney required, dependent on the type of trust structure, do they now need to continue to be involved? But having that solid support team around you. And I think when it comes to settlement, I say this to people all the time, you don't need to have the questions now, just take stock of events, there's no rush at all. You'll receive the sum of money, but just take your time with it. Don't rush into anything. And I think it's so important to just understand what you want to do rather than thinking, right, the case is now settled, we now need to go and do X, Y, and Z. It's just take your time and speak to the right people, and then it'll all become more normal.
And then obviously where a deputy's involved as well, you work collaboratively with them to make sure the family feel informed and understand what the next phase is going to look like. For those that don't know, I think sometimes receiving financial planning advice or investment advice, even if somebody has sort of had some financial planning, maybe they've had a pension through their employment, or, they've had some advice on a couple of ISAs and smaller investments, or maybe they've had an inheritance through their life, but actually this is a whole different measure, and it seems like a huge amount of money, but perhaps, we've talked about this previously in other podcasts, that it's not a windfall, and it's not, you're not like going off and having a jolly life. It's to bring you a quality of life that you want to continue to have after an injury. So what process do you go through as a chartered financial planner who specialises in this sort of work to make families feel understood, whether there's a professional deputy involved or not, and to go through the process of making sure that what you're advising is the right thing for them?
Yes, I think in both scenarios, if there's a professional deputy or not, and always when the family's involved, it's about understanding what that money is there to do. It's not a windfall, it's not a lottery win, and even when you're dealing with significant sums of money, the way that money's been calculated is to put them back in the position they would have been if this life-changing event never happened. So it's not, they've not just suddenly got rich. This is just hopefully, and it will never do this because of what's happened, but it's just trying to put them back into the position they would have been in prior to this event. So
as best as is possible in the current situation.
So if this person's now not able to work, it's about breaking down that a large portion of this money is to replicate the income that you would have been receiving. So it's about looking at this very large sum of money, and what I quite like to do in all meetings is looking at this very large sum of money and just trying to break it down into lots of different pots for what this person needs. So, right, what do you need now? What do you need in the next 5 years? And then that person now knows, they know they've got a pot for their income that they're receiving a monthly income from. They even know that they've got their holiday pot for the holidays that they would have went on anyway. And the money's all structured around what their needs are. So it's just trying to look at this large sum of money, even more modest sums as well, and just breaking it down to think, right, what do you need this money to do for you? And just helping them appreciate how long this money's got to last for.
Yeah, and how do you demonstrate that? It's really difficult, I think, for an individual to see maybe a multi-million-pound settlement and understand what that looks like in the different pots. So how do you practically go about helping somebody to see where that money, sort of the different points in which that would drop into their life and provide that, and how it's going to last?
So when we first meet with clients, it's very important that they understand what that money's got to do for them. And you can have lots and lots of conversations about you can do this, you can do that. But what we want to do is to help them is create that financial plan so they can see, so them and their families, the professional deputy, can see what that financial plan looks like for them. And every financial plan is going to be completely different. So you're looking at the two main time frames is the short term, which is generally from now for the next 5 years. What do they need that money to do for them in that period, whether it's buy a property, get a new car, even just simple things like going on holiday. They've always wanted to do their garden up, gift family for the care that they've provided. All of these things, even very, very small things, you're factoring everything into the financial plan. So they know for the next 5 years potentially that whatever they want to do, it's catered for. The money's structured in a way that the plan's in place for that. But I always say the financial plan, and when providing financial advice, something that's so important is it's not a sort of create a financial plan now, you help this family out, you help the deputy out and think, right, there you go, our work's done. It's a relationship that's going to go on for a long time. And I always say that to people, we're going to need to meet at least once a year, so you want to make sure that you want to meet me once a year, so you need to know that we're going to get on, and you're going to have that relationship that's going to develop. And going back to the financial plan, so you're having potentially a number of meetings with that person to help them understand what that money's got to do for them. You create that financial plan, and a great tool within it that I think for anyone can just help them visualise what that money can do for them is completing cash flow planning, which projects what that money has to do for them. So they might, even things like replacing a car every 3 years, they need £5,000 a month for their income. That always factored into this cash flow planning that projects, is this financial plan sustainable for the person, or do we need to make any further changes? And that financial plan is something that's changing all the time. It's not something that's going to be the same for even the next 5 years. It's something that's changing every single year, and yeah, it just forms such an important part of their life, and just helping them visualise and just breaking down things that may seem complicated, and just thinking actually it's because it's not actually that bad. And when people start to realise that and just think, actually, yeah, this isn't as bad as I thought it was going to be, just trying to make complicated things simple, you're doing something right.
Yeah, so I think that's a really important part, isn't it? It's not just a one hit and you're done in terms of the advice. It is a relationship, and it's hopefully a long-term relationship for the rest of that person's life. And I think, the cash flow that you mentioned is important, because over that longer period of time, people's lives change. Perhaps somebody's needs might change. They may have a slight improvement in their medical conditions, or their rehab may mean that they progress to a different level, and their care needs might change. And I think so as part of that financial plan, you would factor in if somebody's had a lump sum, or if somebody's had a lump sum and a periodical payment, you'd look at the longer term plan for that and what potentially their needs may look like as they change.
Of course, yeah, the cash flow plan and then the financial plan, what you start with on that meeting, the first or the second meeting, that financial plan you create, after year one, after year two, it's going to be completely different. Because I think when somebody receives a settlement, they don't know what their life's going to look like, and over time their lives develop. It might be that their care plan changes, they might even get back into work, they might get married, and just being there for them during all these key life events is so important, that they know they've got somebody that can help them buying their first house, for example. All these key things in life, they know that they're not doing it alone. And it's always nice to be part of that journey with the person, seeing how their conditions improving over time, and their education on what they thought was quite complicated matters just begins to ease, and you can see the confidence in them sort of growing, and their life just improving over time because of that original financial plan you put in place. I think that's certainly one of the best things about the job.
Yeah, and I think, how do you navigate as a financial planner? You obviously have certain compliance or regulatory things that you've got to do, which probably can seem quite onerous to the individual and the family themselves, but obviously it's really important to make sure that you've considered all those things, that the compliance and regulatory things are there to designed to sort of encourage. How do you manage balancing what you've got to do from a regulatory and compliance perspective, some of which those conversations could potentially be quite complicated, with ensuring that the family understand what's going on, how you can help, where things are progressing to?
Yeah, and I think there's no rush on these things. So more from the family's point of view, it can take as long as it needs to. There's no rush for them to make any decisions, and just helping them understand that there's a process in place, and that even though if it might take an extra week or two, the advice that we are providing, we are making sure that it is suitable for them. So all the work that we provide and the advice that we set out for individuals is always pre-checked, which means it goes through a compliance team that makes sure that that advice is suitable for the person. So it's just helping them understand that process. They might think, well, why do you need a copy of my passport, or why do you need a copy of my bank statement? It's just because, again, they've never been through this process before likely, so it's just helping them understand the process and that it's designed in a way that's with their interests at the centre of. And I think because all of us at Paladin we've always specialised in this specific type of advice, we've been able to streamline the process because we know who's at the centre of it. So yeah, it's certainly easier than it used to be. I think with technology as well, there's not as much paperwork, and ID can be checked online and things. So it's certainly better than it was.
Good. And I think you mentioned at the start that Paladin are independent, and I think perhaps for those people who aren't dealing with a professional deputy, can we talk a little bit about the difference between an independent financial planner, perhaps a restricted financial planner, and then often families can get involved directly with investment providers as well as part of this process. So is it important for families to understand the difference between those so they're able to make an informed decision?
Yeah, I think when you're having a conversation with any financial advisors, it's important to understand what their position is in terms of independence or restricted, or even, I suppose, trying to do it yourself. So looking at each one for them to, because I suppose technically the family, that person could just go on and invest the money themselves and manage that money themselves. And some people can, some people do, but it's just about understanding the other options out there. There is support there. It's this money that's been received. It's a one-time payment that no matter what happens, it will never be replaced. So it's about doing the right thing with that sum of money. The difference between independent and restricted, and I think one of the main reasons why Paladin was created and the way that we've structured it in terms of independence, it means that being independent, you're able to advise on any product, any solution that's out there, any investment manager, just based on whatever that person's needs is. And I think because of the people that you're supporting, the demographic of people, what they've done in their working lives, the age of them, like I've got clients from 5 up to age 70, so what their needs are is completely different. And being able to look at what's called the whole of market, so you can look at any solution that's out there and basically select the one that's most suitable for that person. Whereas with restricted, you can advise on potentially a certain type of product or through one investment manager, as opposed to looking at the wider market and what's out there. But I think for that person, it's important to understand each one and then select the option that's best for them.
Yeah, and like you say as well, it's important that you're hopefully going to be in their lives for a long time to come. Yeah. So,
and I think it can be quite a funny conversation. Like even recently I was speaking with a young woman, she was 25, and I was sort of saying to her, like, this, we're going to be meeting at least once a year for a very long time. They might be looking at you and think, oh God. But it's about helping them understand that and appreciate that you're going to be with them through these key stages in their life. And I think being with them through that and your relationship develops, it's what it's all about. I think, it's even on that point about the type of advisors, I always say one of the most important things, and what I will say to people is you want to be working with somebody that you know you're going to be able to get on with. It's one of the most important things, regardless of what they're advising on, that you know you like this person, you're going to get on with them, because they're going to be with you for a very long time.
Good. And then I think, just to finish, we've talked a lot about those individuals that have had a brain injury and have been through the litigation process and perhaps have a settlement, and I know that that's the area in which you really specialise. But we do have some people that listen that don't or can't go through that process of claiming compensation, that perhaps are struggling, that we've supported maybe with the welfare benefits. Are there any tips or guidance that you think you could give to those people in terms of what they should be thinking about and how they can maybe try to make things a little bit easier from a financial perspective?
I'd say ask the question. There's support out there, even with us. I'll always take time to have a conversation with somebody, answer questions on email, have a call with them, just so they're able to get all their questions answered. So even if there's not an ongoing claim, they're not alone. And yeah, that's what we like to do at Paladin. We can, I suppose, help anybody, and yeah, they're not alone in what they're doing. So this just ask the question, and there's lots of support out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think sometimes people may have things from previous working relationships that they might be able to access sooner than otherwise, that maybe it's worth exploring and looking at other options that are out there. But yeah, well, thanks so much for joining us today. It's been really useful listening to the process that you go through and the sort of specialisms that you've got, and how important it is to sort of really build that strong relationship with either the professional deputies or litigation solicitors that instruct you, and more specifically the families themselves and the individuals. So yeah, it's really good to hear about the process that you go through and how you support those individuals in the long term. So thank you.
No problem. Not happy to share. It's been good.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us today. If any of you've got any questions for Liam at Paladin or us at the Brain Injury Group, please get in touch by using enquiries@braininjurygroup.co.uk. Thanks again to our sponsors, Abilities Enabled.